Okay, tonight we will be studying chapter 14 through 17. Chapter 14 ends at the conclusion of 14. We end the first cycle of speeches, and then chapter 15 starts the second cycle of speeches, and we will discuss that. As you know, this is a very unique book, very complex book. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this right. And there's so many things that you can look at this book and learn. A lot of people, say, "What do you do in times of suffering?" For me, I find it so much more than just about suffering. It's where's your mind at? Where's your head at when things go bad, and how you're serving God. It's how you speak and make sure you're speaking about things that are true, that you know are true. Before you go and talk to someone, be careful about how you're conducting yourself and what you're saying. Don't make assumptions. There's just so many things in this study. Actually, as one of the elders here, I just think about the importance of when you go and talk to someone about not drawing a conclusion before you have the facts, and going and speaking to someone and making sure that what you're speaking is true. At the beginning, and I'm going to go back and review a little bit. At the beginning, of course, the main character is Job and his friends. And so at the onset of the study, we find that Job was a righteous man. He was a godly man. He's a man who made sacrifice. He was aware of sin. This is not a man who was oblivious to life and the importance of serving God. He got it. And in doing so, we see the conversation between Satan and Job, and how God had confidence in Job and saying, "Hey, I believe this man believes in me, not just for the purpose of what I give him or what he has gotten." Again, and so God allows Satan to tempt him. Always remember in these conversations, Job and none of his friends are aware of the conversation between Satan and God. And we're seeing conversations happen between friends based upon their fundamental belief in, as I use the word and I see it, is real times either you get a reward or you get a punishment. And so the philosophical thought here is, in these cases, is, hey, if I sin, bad things are going to happen to me. If I am obedient, then I'm going to become wealthy. And so the friends are coming from that standpoint. And Job philosophically comes from that same standpoint. But where we see Job's conflict for him is in the fact that Job knows he's righteous. And all of a sudden now he has something that's going against even what he thought. He's suffering wickedness. He's suffering bad things. And so, God punishes those who are wicked. I haven't been wicked. I'm righteous. And he knew he had been right. And he is battling within that concept of his belief system. And when we start to hear these cries of, maybe you say Job was rambling in his pain. Job is not only suffering an emotional state, but he's also suffering a physical ailment, and also a theological process is that this doesn't add up to what I understand to be the truth. And so in his rambling and his talking about why is God doing this to me, understand that's a real struggle. And I don't know how many of you have had things in your life that you've been dealing with, and you ask yourself, how am I going to handle this? We look at, we blame God, or we forget about Satan. And Satan hides off, and we don't handle these situations in the correct way. And so everything that we're seeing from Job in these conversations, it very easily could happen to you and I, that these are real points, real friends coming and trying to give you advice that may not be sound. They have a lot of godly points into it, but they're not accurate. They're misapplied. And so this is what we've been seeing. When it started out, Job in his, see if I can make this thing work. I think okay. Job in his first cycle of speeches, first he complained about why God had done these things to him. He wished he'd more or less had not lived. And so, that's after Job has sit quietly for 7 days. Now all of a sudden, he starts to speak in his pain and his anguish, and he starts to complain and why these things have happened. Well, the three friends that are sitting there are saying, hey, Job, you're obviously a sinner. Finally these things had come. Yeah, you may have gotten prosperous, all of a sudden these things are coming. So they start to have a conversation, with Job. And chapter 4 and 5 is the conversation with Eliphaz. Well, listen, saying, hey, Job, he was nice. Hey, Job, you're a good man, but hey, you reap what you sow, and so you need to be able to swallow it and repent, and God will forgive you. But see, Job had again a philosophical idea. Thought is, I didn't sin. How can I repent? I can't just repent to my friends just to appease you. He wasn't going to be. He'd be a hypocrite if he had said, "Hey, yeah, okay, just to shut you up, I'll say I sinned." He knew he didn't. Job had character, but so Job in 6 and 7 says, again, as you said, troubles are great, and as friends, you are no help. You're not helping me walk me through this, and I am an innocent man. Then Bildad speaks in chapter 8, and he says, sinners. Again, man's in ashes. He's sitting there in ashes with sores and boils, and he's disfigured, and you don't even recognize the man. And here comes Bildad and said, hey, you're a sinner. Accusing him outright, making an assumption again, based on the philosophy that if things like this happen, you obviously sin. And, he said, hey, sinner, this is punishment on you. And, God is a just God. And if you had been innocent, this wouldn't happen. And so that's the statement that he makes in those chapters. In 9 and 10, Job replies back to his friends. How can one receive justice from God? He didn't understand what was happening. Again, what his friends are saying, plus he knew he was innocent. Plus, everything I pull out is he definitely believed that you received punishment if you were wicked at the same moment in time it happened. But he knew he was innocent, and again, we see him conversing with his friends. And then in chapter 11, we see Zophar, probably most direct friend. The courage that, I don't know, maybe courage isn't the right word, maybe somebody has a better word, or the gall, maybe, to say what he said. You deserve more than what you're getting. God has not punished you enough. Again, keep the image in your mind of what Job looked like. and what he's gone through. Lost all his family, lost all his wealth, lost, his health, and he can't move, and his body is just in torment. And under the pressure of that, Zophar says these words, you're guilty of this sin, and you deserve a whole lot more punishment than that. This doesn't come across as a loving. Now, grant you, these three men are believers, and they are right. They have righteous men. The problem is they draw a conclusion that's not based on facts. So they're making statements, and if I can warn you as a congregation, the biggest trouble I've ever seen, the biggest trouble I've ever had, is when I've come and talked to somebody, I didn't have facts. Sometimes I had made an assumption on what I thought was the right way to go, and that's come back that's come back and haunted me. And sometimes it gets embarrassing to have to go back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong in that area." And so, we all, as Christians, can draw a conclusion. We can draw a line saying, "Hey, this person is not a good mom or a good dad or a good Christian, a good whatever," and we say, "Well, this is why things happen." That doesn't mean it's true. So be careful, and we see that these friends are putting Job in torment, in emotional torment of how he is going. And you can see in the night in his conversation, you can see it ramping up more and more about blaming God. God, why? Won't you just let me die? Won't you just let me go? And if you have to put me in the grave that's what we're going to say. Put me in the grave just for a little bit until your anger gets past me. He is getting so worked up into that he's saying things that are pretty harsh. But though, remember, when you see in the context of the conversation, he never denies God. And so, Job responds, and this is where we finished up last week. He calls them foolish for what they're saying, and that he thought, in his belief system, that God will vindicate him. That somewhere down the line, he didn't know how, or didn't know what. This is when he had his light when it came on. God will vindicate me. God will make sure and take care of me. And so tonight we look at chapter 14. This is the end of the first cycle of the conversations. And let me see how. I think. I don't think he points out. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. If you look under point C there at the bottom, excuse me, I have yet to learn how to run this clicker very well. Job opens up the statement in chapter 14, and he makes a statement: man's days are, man who is born a woman is a few days and full of trouble. And he comes forth like a flower and fades away. He flees like a shadow and does not continue. Can anybody kind of tell me what's happening there with him? I'm going to throw the question out to you. What is happening, to him and to make him make that statement? How many times do we use that verse in Invitations? And we hear that statement. And so we got to be careful a lot of times when you use statements like this. This is verbally inspired, but this is not necessarily from the point of God. This is Job making a declaration of what he has observed in life. And so, man who is born a troublous few days, he just, all he sees is he's lived his life, and life's nothing but trouble. Again, he is forgetting all those good things that he had in his earlier part of his life, all the riches and all those things. He has gotten caught up in his present day distress. Happens to us too. How many of us have been blessed, but when we get under stress, maybe we're sick, maybe we're in a bad frame of mind, and we forget about that. What we see here is that he makes a declaration, and so he understands. He's talking about his frailty, and he is really, he's really getting frustrated and trying to figure things out. And then, I keep breathing on this mic. And then also, in the first two verses, that's pretty much what he talks about. Man is born a woman's full of trouble. And then Job also, in part of a prayer, he's more or less consider how frail man is. And he was asking God to have mercy on him. When you look at that verse, he talks about that. He talks about man born. It also says a man, he comes like a flower. And for a little bit, then he goes away. And he flees like a shadow that does not continue. Again, when we see a shadow of something, it's not going to be there for very, very long. It's just there for a point in time. Again, and this is what Job is seeing. And then verse 4 says, bring me to judgment. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? And so we can see here, Job is trying to figure out why things are happening. He is saying, God, I can't be. He realizes that all men have sinned. Otherwise, he would never have offered sacrifices if he didn't think he had sinned. But how could he? How can you make a clean thing out of an unclean? And his whole thought is why I cannot be perfect? But why are you attacking me? You set these ways. And then on top of that, he's pretty much asking God life is so short. And because life's so short and all these things are so much trouble, Job's saying, more or less going to say is, why are you attacking me? And because that's what he feels like. You think of reality of eternity. If we're here 80 plus years, 70, 80 years on average, hopefully, we'll all get, even if you get to 100 in view of infinity, or that's what eternity is. It means never ending. We're really here for a short time. And so, he's trying to say, hey, why are we going through, and why am I having to deal with this and be attacked for that? Any conversation or any thoughts about that? Right. We're fortunate. I think 2 Timothy 1:10 talks about things that the gospel teaches us about eternity, and so we have an advantage in that through the gospel that we get to know more about what happens after after death and in the future. Again, Job I believe he had some concepts of things, but he didn't necessarily was fully developed in thoughts about things. And so, and again, kind of thought is, too, you're saying is that, hey, if I die, then all this stuff is going to go away, and I'm not going to have to deal with it anymore. Excuse me. And the next point there is the hopelessness of death. We see here his thought is, if you were to consider a tree, and a lot of us, if you live in the country, or if you had a tree that has sitting there and has fallen down, through time, if you watch, there'll be a bud, a life that had come from a tree, and even though it appears to be dead, it can live again, and it can develop and redevelop itself into a tree. Be likened, here we are as man. While we're here, this is all we have, and once we die, is what you mentioned, I think, a little bit idea about eternity. Once we die, that's it. There's not going to be anything else. There's no other hope, for us. And so there's no hope. Hopelessness of death is what the point is there, that there is none. So it's going to come back. But anyway, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. In point E there, he says, hide me in the grave till this wrath has passed. He was looking for talking about, take me down to Sheol, take me down to death, and allow all these things to go by until your anger is more or less has passed. And so, so Job is seeing this as being attacked. He thinks of what is going on in his life, and if you view it of his hope, is being destroyed. Just like if you, again, as illustrated, as a mountain would crumble, or as if you want to see what a lot of water would do to a roadway coming to my driveway, I can tell you what happens. It's, the pressure of the water is going to destroy. It's going to destroy whatever is there, and that's what he likens to himself, is that, hey God, the pressure and the suffering that I'm going through, and the mark that you have put upon me, is destroying my hope. It's just like that hard rain, or that, as you think of anything that would create pressure, would be destroyed. And so that's what he's declaring. And so if he could go to the grave, he could, and when God's anger had come, then he could find a sense of peace. And so that concludes his speech. Anybody else have anything to say about that? Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the way as you notice, he doesn't necessarily respond like a debate. One makes a point or the other. But I think he is. I think he is working out things. But also you see how many times do we contradict ourselves when we're trying to work out something. And trying to work out the things that happen to us and the nature of God, and we battle those things. And sometimes we say things that we don't really mean under the pressure. And we see that a lot of times in Job's conversation where he goes forward, and I think he backtracks some as well. Anybody else?
Something else he does, he pointed out in verse 7, where he starts talking about nature. And he argues from this point of nature, that nature wants to live. It fights to live. You can cut a 100-foot tree down, and it may take a while, but it will sprout back up. You pour concrete over it, all of a sudden there's a crack, and this little seed there. Or, these animals in nature documentaries that, here comes a lion to attack, and that animal is struggling to get away, and it's fighting to get away, because we have this desire to live. And yet Job proceeds to talk about just
Yeah.
giving up hope. He talks about hope later, but when we get to that point where we've given up hope, then that's a little struggle.
And I really like the phrase "giving up hope." Where do we go? When we give up and we quit, only bad things are going to happen. When we give up on God and try to understand, how many times you see people walk away from the faith because they can't quite figure out things? Many years ago, actually, I was talking to he's now a withdrawn brother who just could not deal with the issues and understanding of Job. Because he could not work out that just allowed him to justify and to step away from it. It became an excuse, but he just gave up. In his mind, there was no hope. He didn't, he allowed himself to grow. In this situation, when Job couldn't understand why he was suffering, and asking, to a certain degree, he was giving up hope that of what his life was, even though, I think he still hoped that when he did die eventually, and when the second coming was coming, that he could have that hope. But again, this is just a tough thing that he is going through. In chapter 15, Eliphaz starts to come in and discuss. Again, he comes in pretty strong. He's a little bit tougher this second cycle than he was the first time. And he tells Job here, let's see. They're up there. Hey Job, your words are empty. Everything that you're saying, they're nothing. And then point 2 there, you're irreverent toward God. And so, Job in his part of his conversation has drawn a conclusion that, hey, God punishes the good and the bad too. In part of his speech, he has made that statement, which goes against their thought of God punishes you when you sin, and if you're right, you're not punished. So when Job knows that part of the conversation has mentioned that, you're saying you're being irreverent toward God. That you're more or less, if God treats the wicked and the righteous alike, then more or less, why should you ever fear God? You don't. There's no need to be obedient if that is what's happening. And so the reason why they're drawing that conclusion is they're thinking that the punishment happens immediately. Again, they don't understand what real eternity is and where punishment really lies. it sits there. So they're thinking that Job is being irreverent to God. He is nullifying how God disciplines and how God handles things. And so, as part of point C is there, your own words testify against you. And so, everything you're saying just shows that you're irreverent, Job. This is why these things are bad happening, is that you just don't respect God and what He can do. Then he asks, "Are you wiser than us?" They were aged men, and they thought they had wisdom on their side. They thought they had history on their side, and so he asked them, "Are you wiser than us?" And then why do you reject wisdom, Joe? Why don't you listen to what we're saying? And in this part of the speech, hopefully I'm not getting ahead of in my notes there. Job's friends thought they were consoling him. By speaking what they thought was God's law. And so, again, a lot of times we've been driven from a point of what we think what God is saying and not showing love. But that's just what, and this is what they're fighting against. Is said, hey, you're rejecting wisdom, and God has these things written, and you are doing that. And from our vantage point as readers, and knowing and having the Gospels, the New Testament, we understand why Job. We understand that it wasn't love because he didn't have the facts. But this is what Eliphaz is making a declaration to him. And he also says in the verses 14 through 16, man cannot claim to be innocent. Who is pure and righteous? Job, again, he claimed that he hadn't done anything wrong, but so he said, how can you claim that? Even the angels, even those in the heavens are not, are sinners, and so how can you claim to be pure? You know that you're not. And then trying to make sure, based on time, I don't get in trouble. And so toward the tail end of chapter 15, Eliphaz tells Job, hey, the wicked suffer. If you look at, we'll look at just a second, verses like 20 through 24, we'll kind of read some of the things that he said. He said that the wicked writhe in pain all his days, and the numbers of his years hidden from the oppressor. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. He does not believe that he will return from darkness, for a sword is waiting for him. He wanders about for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king ready for battle. So here here is Eliphaz making description to Job. These things are what's going to happen. This is what happens to the wicked. And then Job, if you put your life up to what I was got through reading, that's what you're going through, and that's what's happened. And 27 to 35, what concept again is the wicked do not prosper. Job was very wealthy. He was the greatest in the area. And here you go, Job. It got all taken away from you. And that's, and so you're not going to prosper because of that. And again, This is attack on Job's character. And that concludes the attack, the wording that Eliphaz had toward Job. Anybody had thoughts on that? Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, sometimes that's what we do. And again, I can take from myself, from experience, make sure you know what you're talking about before you say it. Know your facts. Rule one before you say anything. Really take time to think about what you're saying. Make sure you know, and use tact when you do talk. Make sure you're aware. Anybody else? Yeah. Right. He calls them that. Only thing I admire about the thing, again, the problem is that they didn't have the facts, is that they cared about his soul enough to ask him to repent. Their thing is they thought he was sin, and Job's problems, if he would confront his sin, these things would go away. So, if we see sin, we want to confront that. The biggest thing is they drew a conclusion that he sinned, and they didn't have any facts. They knew his life. He knew him well. They had no evidence to support that. Right. So that's part of the conflict. Yeah. Right. Oh. And I think toward the end, Job never fully comprehends why things are written. But maybe it's just for a time such as this that these things are written for us. Let me look at chapter 16 and 17, kind of go through this fast. I want to answer to Donnie why I didn't get finished. And Donnie, I appreciate his ability to do this. In 16, he says pretty much, hey, you're miserable comforters. He's telling his friend, hey, your words are empty. And pretty much, I could have come and done this. Same thing you did to me, I could have done to you. I could have charged that. But I would have come in with love, and because again, Job has insight to what is really happening. But he makes his charge, hey, I could have come in and done what you've done, and I would have come in with the point of love. The second point there in chapter 16, verses 6 through 7, Job cries out, God is against me. He cried out because but he didn't have any relief. He said all things have been taken away. He had a sense of loneliness that he was going through. He mentions that, I'm not in the wrong place. Point C there, he talks about you have shriveled me up, again, through all his suffering. Again, this is him speaking now in front of his friends, but to God. Hey, God, you more or less, he felt like he hated me. Hey, you tore me as an animal does his prey. As an animal grabs and tears apart. That's what he he feels this happened to him. And he feels that because his men have joined God and delighted in his misery. And that's what he feels toward, I think, toward his friends. He feels like his friends have mistreated him. And that in point F there, he feels that God, in his mind, has treated him as an enemy. More or less, he feels like God had set him up as a target, that he's aiming at him through all these pains. This is what God's doing to me. And so he felt that way. And so in that part, Job, he was mourning. It said he sewed sackcloth upon his skin. His face was red and weeping. That sackcloth on the skin was the idea is that, hey, this suffering will never end. The sewing on your own skin is the idea of, hey, this is a permanent thing. But based on all that stuff, hey, in points H there, I'm innocent. And he knew that he wasn't guilty of sin, even though he felt like he was being targeted. He prays for vindication. Job is asking for justice. He's pleased with God. He's pleased with God. To plead for Job's cause as well as self. So he wanted God to plead him, or he wanted his friends, somebody to more or less to plead his case for him, to set things right. And then also he pleads with God to make bail for him. He was looking to for someone, you think of in prison, to make amends for him, to help him to be able to resolve these issues. And then in 17:6 through 9, he said, I've been made a spectacle of. He said that people have spit on me, my eyes and my body, more or less, they have gone awry. Also, good people, right people go around and they see me and they're astonished by me and they denounce me. But it says, but in verse 9, I will, he was going to maintain his innocence and become stronger. And then the last point, chapter 17 will close, is that, he felt like all hope is gone. He knew that there was no wisdom or help from his friends. And he felt like only death was going to be close and near. And so that ends the part of Job, and we'll start with the chapter 18 next week. Thank y'all.